Ladies and gentlemen, friends, listeners and colleagues, here we are again, another session to look forward to, and it's one that I look forward to every other week. And the one I'm talking about is Turbulence with David Banmiller, 50-year aviation veteran and author of Turbulence. David, lovely to see you again.
And you too. Thanks for
having me again. Really nice. I love these little sessions. It's all, I feel as if I'm going to see my regular shrink now, or somebody that I see on a regular basis. I've got to clear that up. I don't have a shrink, by the way.
I have to tell you, you're one of the best interviewers. You make the whole experience easy. So thank you for that. I feel very comfortable.
Oh, David, thank you so much. You made my day, my friend. I love you. And I have done since we started. So here we go. Now we're on our 6th session and we're addressing chapter 5, which is moving the iron. Moving the iron, which is a great one. Now, at the beginning of this chapter, you make a very logical reference to restaurants having to have many covers and Broadway having to sell seats. And I was just listening to something from Lloyd Webber saying that where he's got big shows, he has to hit roughly 75 to 80% seat occupancy.
That's interesting.
To start making money, so it's a huge effort. So what he was saying is, even as we come out of lockdown now, if there's some sort of meet me halfway from the government by saying you need social distancing, what he's saying is for the big productions, it just can't be done because 50% occupancy just means they're continuing losing money. So touch wood, things are going to work out better, but it puts things into perspective with an aircraft. Because
I would make this point very quickly. If you have one person paying $10,000 for a seat, he'll be okay. The problem is it's the supply and demand. So the airline industry is about 70-75% sweet spot. But when you flex the pricing, if you go higher on price, you don't need to fill as many seats, but fewer people can afford to fly.
Yeah.
So it's probably the same thing in the theater when you think about it, because people aren't going to spend $1,000 to $5,000 for a seat. And then he also has the same distribution system issues, right?
Yep.
Because guys take a cut out of the online sales.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, but but I thought it was a nice way to start, just putting things in perspective. And obviously with an aircraft, safety first, which is the core, which is the heart of everything that we do. Then you've got the customer service, which is the bloodline, that keeps everything going. And then moving the iron is the oxygen or the profit, and how often that moves and how effectively and efficiently is the key. And no profit, no business. And although that statement makes sense, David, that isn't what was happening, and it isn't what's happened over history, because in some cases, organizations, especially airlines, they're not making money and they get propped up, and it doesn't do any good for the rest of the industry.
Yeah, that's been a problem historically. When people have this view that the industry makes a lot of money, well, statistics don't support that. Done well the past several years. And part of it, by the way, is because of yield management technology.
Yeah.
You used to have to pay agents to talk to you on the phone, check you in, do all that's all gone.
Yeah.
You have to pay 10% to travel agents for a ticket. That's gone. So the efficiencies of the industry, before we start talking about the aircraft itself, the fuel efficiencies, the design of the airplanes, all of that has improved the economics of the business. And just before COVID, we were doing as an industry in the US about 8% pre-tax, which for our industry was, by the way, pretty good. McDonald's is like 35%, just to give you some perspective, right?
Yeah. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, whether or not the Wright brothers should have been flipping burgers.
Well, I'll tell you, and when you mention the title here, Moving the Iron, I started the book, I was going to call it Moving the Iron. That was the full title.
Yeah.
And we kicked it around with my advisors and some other folks and said, well, turbulence, it's the whole industry. Moving the iron's an internal language, right? When we say moving the iron, we're just moving airplanes. It's not, not really iron, but moving the iron, except that when we come up with turbulence, it seems, especially now, right? More fitting. So, but I'm glad we were able to do a chapter on moving the iron itself, because it focuses a bit on behind the curtain, what it takes to
Well, exactly, and you know, there's some lovely touches that you've put in the chapter, but obviously the planes themselves, the engines, you know, the evolution of the business, you know, producing, selling, and leasing planes you've covered, and also the strategy of keeping them in the air and the art of keeping them in the air effectively and profitably. So that's so important, and I love the statement that you said, and I think it's true for so many of us that have been in this industry for so long. No matter how long or short our time in the aviation, the sight of these, and I've called them whales of the skies, it never ceases to amaze.
It's spectacular. When you
How
watch
you,
380 come floating in for landing over 1,000,000 pounds, and it just floats in, you'd say, how is that possible?
yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I've got to admit, I used to live, I lived for a little while in Miami, and I used to go to a restaurant and a bar that had a rooftop, and it was where the cruise ships used to come down.
I know where it is. I used to live near there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I loved it because, and especially where you get lovely big plate of hot wings, good old pitcher of beer, and then suddenly you've seen this enormous thing floating down. Well, for me, the aircraft in the sky is just tipping it upside down. It's such an amazing sight to see both. One, how that amount of weight floats, and the other one, how that amount of weight and size can fly. It's incredible.
Yeah. In fact, Butch Stewart, when he started Sandals and Beaches Resorts, you know, Butch was my old boss at Air Jamaica. His first hotel was right off the runway in Montego Bay. And he was nervous about the noise. So he reversed it. Brilliant guy. He just unfortunately recently passed, but really, really a marketing genius, frankly.
Yeah.
So he turned it around and told everybody, wave at the airplane when it lands, because when you're on the beach at the Sandals there on Montego Bay, you see the airplane coming in.
Yeah.
And it's very close to you. And so everybody would wave with the airplane coming in. It was absolutely remarkable.
A great welcomer, and what a great place as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sandals, lovely. Now, at the beginning of the chapter, you also talk about your visit to the Boeing Everett in Washington, the factory, you know, and looking at the at various parts being put together on the 747 and the 777s. But that in itself is an incredible building, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know whether it still is, but is it the largest building in the world?
It probably still is, and there might be something else out there now, but I doubt it. And it's monstrous. And you know, I've been there many times, but as part of this book, I wanted to do some additional research. So I reached out to the CEO. They were very accommodating, and they had somebody meet me and VIP me with a golf cart and going through literally on the floor. Not everybody gets to zip around the floor, right?
Yeah.
And what struck me amongst all the things that struck me there is robotics, because part of the assembly uses robotics. And I was watching this machine, this arm going around, putting screws in. And you know, by the way, that airplane, just a matter of interesting data, 30% of an airplane's cost are the engines.
Yep.
So when we talk about the most recent problem with a Boeing airplane, the 777,
Yeah.
and the engine fire and the engine fan blades.
Yeah.
People say, well, there goes Boeing again. Well, it was Pratt and Whitney. I mean, Boeing just hung it, but nobody talks about that.
Yeah.
You talk about the change in the engines that we mentioned, the thrust from the old days with the first 707s were like 110,000, or not even that. I think per engine it was like 15,000 pounds. And now you got an engine over 120,000 pounds. You can stand inside it. But back to your remark about Seattle and Seattle Field, it's remarkable to actually go through and watch the assembly. It's
must be amazing. I think you said something like it was like something like 90 or 98 acres, the size of the building.
Yeah.
I mean,
in fact,
that's like 100 football pitches.
Oh yeah, and I think at one point, and this is going by memory, they might have had some atmospheric problems inside with either rain or something, because it's so big it could have its own weather, I think.
Amazing. Now, you mentioned there about the power of engines, And again, some of the facts that you've put in this chapter it just makes you sit back and think, my God, you know. But one of them was that you were saying that the 777 engine, one single engine, over 110,000 horsepower, which is the same as twice the design output of all the Titanic steam engines put together.
Yeah, I mean it's remarkable, the thrust and the power. And for the folks that talk about green energy and what have the airlines done, the airlines only produce about 2% of the emission problems, basically, let's call it, in the world. I mean, India and China are worse, and coal obviously is a contributor. But the industry itself has never gotten the sort of credit that it's deserved on noise performance, which has been dramatically improved, and emissions.
Yeah.
That's before you talk about the thrust, where you can now lift up this 1,000,000-pound airplane, whereas before it was a couple of 100,000 pounds. And the difference, aside from design improvements, which we know about in terms of the skin and that sort of thing, and every year is a little bit better, and the winglets that curve up, that improve airflow and lift and that sort of thing, and fuel burn.
Yeah.
The engines themselves have been a remarkable technology change over the years.
Incredible. Yeah, it's incredible. And again, another statistic you mentioned there is about the difference between the old 707 and today's 380 is 6 times the pounds on takeoff, which is incredible.
And you know, I read something a long time ago, and I've flown it or thrown it out at speeches from time to time. The Wright brothers takeoff and landing could have been done in the coach section of the 747.
My God.
Yeah, think about it.
Hey, my God. And think how many burgers they could have made.
Yeah. And the wiring, the internal wiring, I think it can go wiring to the moon from the miles and miles of wiring in these wide-bodied airplanes.
My God, my God. Now, another little journey within the journey of this particular book and this chapter is when you start talking about the commercial flight. And I'm not sure, David, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you make reference to, I think it was Tony Janus flew, a local businessman.
Yeah, over Tampa Bay. And that was the first commercial business. And by the way, they have an annual Janus Award.
Do they?
Yeah, maybe I should put your name in one day. I certainly haven't gotten any, but in any case, yeah, every year it's a Janus Award. But that was the first commercial flight down in Tampa, Florida.
Amazing. And he charged what was it, Abraham File, $400, which is the equivalent of about 10 or 11 grand in today's greenback.
Yeah, and it was just a short hop in an older airplane, but yeah, that was the first one. It's a good quiz question for TV.
Yeah, it is. Actually, myself and Salem, we're thinking of doing an aviation quiz show as well, just to see how much people actually know about the.
That would be entertaining.
Yeah. So we're thinking of letting people have their own specialist subject, and then some general knowledge questions, and then just see which teams come out the best. So, yeah, we're thinking of doing that shortly. Now, another point. So we moved from 1914 up to 34. So we got the sale of the DC-2, which had 7 window seats on either side. Okay, but it wasn't profitable.
And that's a classic example of a little bit larger airplane, throw in a couple of more seats. I think it was 7 or 9. And then it was the DC-3, and all of a sudden it turned a profit.
Exactly.
That is almost basic airline economics from like 70 years ago, because you need a number of seats vis-a-vis, the cost of flying and the whole, that's called the capital investment, and the fixed costs, the operating costs, the variable costs, the fuel, so on and so forth. But the more seats, and that gets to, we might talk about it later, the middle seat issue and COVID, and hey, let's not have as many seats. Well, okay, if you want to pay twice as much, that's not a problem, but it's pure economics.
Yeah. And like you said, from the DC-2 to the 3, all they did was widen the tube, put an extra row of seats in, and they also looked at the sleepers for the night flights, and then bang, 50% increase in capacity, 10% increase in cost.
And of course, you can offer a fare less expensively because you're spreading out more seats, ergo you stimulate more traffic.
Yeah, yeah, no, incredible. And then we move forward. So we're like a little time machine here now. So we move forward then to August 55, when Boeing entered the commercial jet age, the 707, and an infamous young man called Alvin Tex Johnson and his stunt that was not by any means planned over Lake Washington with a crowd of over 200,000 in attendance who were there for the Gold Cup hydroplane races. And at a speed of 490 miles an hour, he executed a barrel roll.
Yeah,
I mean,
unplanned and
yeah,
unauthorized.
yeah. I mean, what a crazy fella.
You should see the picture because they have pictures of the airplane inverted from inside. And the CEO at the time, I think, was Bill Allen,
Yeah,
and he didn't authorize it. Remember, the flyover, let's call it that, was a promotional mechanism to market the airplane.
exactly.
And they wanted to show safe, versatile, etc. And this fella just decided to flip it and fly it upside down. And people were aghast. And I think a month later, they got the first 20 orders.
Yes.
People said, oh my gosh. He got chastised for that. He didn't lose his job. And he's become infamous, as has that photo. And the rest is history.
But I got to ask you, I mean, right. Not only did he do it once, he did it twice.
Yeah.
And it wasn't authorized.
Nope.
What on earth would make a test pilot do something like that with so many people? What on earth was in his mind, Dave?
I think, honestly, from what I've understood, is he was a marketing guy. Remember I told you, I think one of the last interviews, how pilots really get into marketing?
Yeah, yeah.
Because when I fly in the cockpits, all I want to do is talk about marketing and selling.
Yeah.
He felt that part of his job wasn't just the mechanical aspects of a test pilot, which is pretty obvious stuff, to in fact, well, wait a minute, what am I doing here? You got a couple 100,000 people. We want to sell the airplane. Let's add a little bit of jazz to it.
Yeah.
That's what happened. So he flipped it over. I mean, you can do it aerodynamically with the airflow. I mean, you can't go like for a long time, but you can do it. And he proved it. When people fly, they get very nervous if there's a blip, right? Or when you go through clouds, because of the nature of clouds, you get bumps. I mean, it just happens. You got hundreds of thousands of pounds of metal zipping around at 35,000 feet. You hit a cloud, you're going to bump.
Yeah, yeah.
But what he proved was it could be remarkably safe. And if people only understood when they get that little blip, that is nothing in comparison to what that airplane can do and is tested to do. And those wings, when they do the test and the engine test, they flop around and you wouldn't believe the flexibility that an engine has on that airplane.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. But you never ever cease to see the people's fear and panic in their faces when they're on board and you go through a lot of turbulence.
Well, if you're in the cockpit, as I've mentioned before, you're safer because you know what's going on. Yeah. Aside from me, just the average person in the cockpit versus in the cabin. When you're in the cockpit, you see everything, you know what's going on, it's comfortable, you get the whole thing. When you're in the back, it's like you're not in control. You wonder what's going to happen next. And so it's human nature in part to have that fear. Now, the more you travel, the more you understand the industry. It's remarkably safe. It gets safer every year. You're a little bit more calm, but it is a difference.
Yeah, but it's still an amazing experience when everything starts to shake so uncontrollably, and it's probably not a good sign when you look at some of the other passengers to see how they react to it.
Yeah, and I've been through a few of those, I can assure you.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. But on this particular occasion, I still can't believe, because again, what you've put in the book about that Bill Allen, they put most of their post-war profits into that particular aircraft. Yeah. And then you've got somebody like Tex decided to flip it over twice and show its capability, and especially in light of the promotional PR that was, the serene travel and you don't feel any vibrations, and it's a wonderful experience. And then to see that, I mean, it's incredible. But like you said, within a short period of time, Pan Am got 20 orders.
Yeah.
And they went on to I can't remember how many you said that they actually sold, but I think it was
Was it thousands? Oh yeah.
Yeah, which is amazing. So then, sir, then we come to the 707 and the first Air Force One jet airplane, which I thought was incredible. And then I had to look up to see who was the first president, and it was JFK.
Yeah, unfortunately, some of those images are of Dallas, as everybody remembers. And I have been on the Ronald Reagan 707.
Yeah.
It's parked in their museum, out in the valley in Southern California. They have his helicopter, they have the 707, they got his limousine. It's all inside. But you go into the airplane and the cockpit, and you think this is the 1930s or 40s. You look, I have a picture in my book of the old cockpits and the new cockpits, and then where Reagan sat and his office, very shoddy. Shoddy. I mean, it was just, you couldn't believe it. Versus, like, next week I'm flying on the 787, and I was there for the rollout, a couple of years ago, and it's a video game. The A380 is the same thing, and the modern technology, and you have the heads-up displays now, where they don't necessarily have to even look at the dials, which aren't the old dials anymore, the old analog dials, but you actually can see some of the instrumentation. It's on the windshield. It's called a heads-up display.
My God.
So you don't have to look down, look up. You can look straight the whole time.
Good God, huh? It always fascinates me, and the pilots, and just the thought of sitting in that seat and having all those people and all that weight and everything, and then the fact that you're flying, it must be such an incredible buzz.
You remember the old flight engineers, right? Nobody remembers them, but you used to have 3 or 4 people in the cockpit, and the flight engineer had all of this information in front of them, dials and widgets and stuff. And then the pilot and the co-pilot, and of course now that's all gone and the technology is different. But another way of following up on your thought, pretend you're in this little space, because in the real estate of a 380, 787, 74, 380 kind of is the best example. You're in this little small space. It's like a closet. I mean, and everything is behind you. 1.2 million pounds. There's fuel. There's 500 or 600 people, and you're in this little thing called a cockpit, and you're pushing a couple of dials, and most of it's automated, and it's absolutely extraordinary. Could you imagine if somebody of 100 years ago, or the Wright brothers would be a good example. The Wright brothers show up, buy a ticket, get on the airplane, and say, "Let me see the cockpit." I mean, they would make a great movie. They say, "Oh my God, is this really what's happened in all those years?" Well, it's been well over 100 years.
No, it's amazing. I seen some pictures of is it Igor Sikorsky?
Yeah.
And where he had his son, one of his sons, and he took him strapped almost to his lap, when he was on one of his flights, on one of the first aircraft before the helicopters. And when you look back and you think how brave or how positive and how confident they were in their own abilities and their own machinery, to do something so unusual to most. It's an incredible thing to see.
One of the things that we have talked about as an industry over the years in the evolution of technology is the basic knowledge of how to fly.
Yeah.
Because back when I did the 172 little airplane learning to fly, right? I mean, everything was in your hands and you understood it. You understood the aerodynamics, left, right, up, down. I mean, but today people are trained in this incredible technology world of ours. And we need to make sure they understand the basic aerodynamic elements of flying, because they're the same.
Yep.
But because of technology and autopilots and that sort of thing, it's so much different than it used to be. I read an article last week. People are talking about just one person in the cockpit.
I know. Yeah.
Well, we have drones flying around with nobody in the cockpit.
Yeah. But it just, do you know what I'm saying? I don't know. It just that seems a step too far, you know.
It may be. It might not pass the comfort level for passengers, amongst
No,
other
no.
things.
Yeah, and I think they have to know. So I think that would be something that's, you know, it doesn't push the realms of reality and capability, but I think just for an individual's perspective, you'd want to know that, God forbid, somebody had a heart attack or something, that there's somebody else there who can just step straight in.
Yeah, I mentioned to you before, I was on a test flight, not a test flight, we were accepting an airplane for Air Jamaica, and we left Toulouse, France, and we were supposed to land in Santa Maria for fuel. And right off landfall, Portugal, the captain passed out. And there was only a couple of us on the airplane. It was a pilot, co-pilot, mechanic, me, and a flight attendant. It was a new airplane. It was a 320. And we had to decide, well, what are we going to do? I mean, we had to literally carry him out of his captain's seat, put him in the first class section. He was out. And then they said, what are we going to do? Or do we go back or go forward? I'm saying, like, this is like middle. It's like LA to Hawaii, when you're right in the middle. Do you go forward or back? Right? It's the same situation. So we called ops, and I decided, they're waiting for us in Santa Maria, so we'll go ahead and do that. Fortunately, he survived. He had food poisoning. We thought he had a heart attack, but it was a wake-up call as to what happens, because we were left with one, and if they had eaten together,
Exactly.
which they didn't, by the way, I had dinner with them, it would have been a different story.
Exactly. But there you go. There's a clear example. If there's only one, and he has a bit of food, and it's the wrong stuff, then blimey, what?
Well, the meal service, in the cockpit's different.
Yeah.
They get different meals.
Yeah.
They never get the same meal.
Yeah. No. I've travelled in there a lot, and it always used to fascinate me with the Nigel cheese board, and how important that cheese board was to some of the pilots.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now moving on again, now we come near to the end of the 60s and the 70s, and you got the DC-10 and the 747, the Queen of the Skies coming in, and all that wide body. And now you've got another challenge again, which is the volumes of people. And if you're not filling those seats for whatever reason, then, goodness me, lots of problems.
Yeah, and it's a combination of obviously filling the seats, pricing, aka also load factor, and then the city pair. I mean, if you're going from LA to San Francisco on a 747, you're never going to make any money. Obviously, it has to be long haul.
Yeah,
London, LA, New York, that sort of thing. The short hops don't work because it takes you roughly a half hour to really get up to cruise. I remember the 747s out of LA to London. We reached cruise over Canada, and you burn 10% of the fuel is to carry the fuel.
Yeah.
So the economics are such that the airplane designs are different, in part economically, for the routes that they're flown.
Yeah, but you look, David, now before the pandemic, and you look at the way some of the larger aircraft were being used. It didn't make any sense whatsoever.
No, it didn't. And what's interesting about the future is you're seeing very subtly a scale back in wide bodies, and some of it not so subtle, right? 747's gone out of Virgin Atlantic. British Airways, gone. 380s, gone. I mean, it's going to be a few left in the Middle East, but they're gone because the economics of the future isn't going to support it, regardless of the fact that, fuel's lower than, because up and down. So you never know for sure about the fuel and the geopolitics that can influence the pricing of fuel. But we're seeing more smaller 150, 180, 200 passenger airplanes than the big ones. The big ones are designed in part to feed hubs.
Yes.
And then a hub and a spoke. So change airplanes into a spoke. That paradigm has switched, and I don't think we're going to see it get back for a very, very long time.
Yeah, no, and you see, like you just mentioned there, if you look at some of the the larger hub operations and the carriers that were predominantly in and out of there, their business model varied. And now, as a result of this pandemic and what was happening just before, you can see, whether by luck or judgment, who knows, but one strategy is much more successful than the other. And now, you're really seeing people, like you said, rein back, what they thought was important, numbers and growth. And now it's a very, very different model indeed.
We have been bounced around like 4 or 5 times on British Airways because we're planning, and now I think absolutely going to happen next week on to Palm Springs in California over Heathrow. And there used to be 10, 12, 15 flights a day between Dublin and Heathrow. Now British Airways flies it twice a week. And Aer Lingus is the backup because they have common ownership. Yeah. So that makes sense. What I saw yesterday, which surprised me in a way, was Aer Lingus on that segment, which is like an hour, they put on their wide body. And I was surprised to see that because they'll take it to Malaga, they'll take it to San Francisco, and it's the 330. So it has a first class cabin and it's dual aisle, as opposed to what they typically would do is the A320 with 150, 160 people. But it's only twice a day. And I think what they did was they said, okay, let's just force everybody to come on that one airplane.
Yeah.
More economical. And as an aside, pretend you are a scheduler these days.
Oh.
You certainly have taken up drinking.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm telling you, it is impossible. I've described before the putting together the quilt of a schedule, which involves not just the city pair, demand, supply, competitive activity, slots, the economics of the airplane, the hubs, the spokes, the duty rigs for pilots and flight attendants, the maintenance requirements on an airplane per block hour. It's a very long list. So now you're sitting here today trying to figure out what you're going to do next week. You used to do it for 330 days out. I mean, that was the pattern. Yeah. Your summer schedule's done. I mean, the winter schedule's almost done. Now, I don't know what's going to happen next week. So the schedulers, and I've seen this firsthand because of our travel requirements. We were going to go to Heathrow and then go to LA. But then LA was canceled, and then they rolled us to another LA flight. Then we were going to do San Francisco, except they're not flying at all to San Francisco until I think April. This is British Airways.
Yeah.
Big market. Yeah. So now we decided, all right, let's check Dallas. Because I figured certain strong hubs, they probably won't cancel. They got to fly some airplanes. So now we're flying Dublin to Heathrow, a couple hours on the ground, on that wide body of Aer Lingus.
Yeah.
And Terminal 2 to Terminal 5. And then we're flying to Dallas to overnight in Dallas, where I now find out at the airport that D Terminal has a fabulous hotel. I've stayed there many times. And I said, is the bar and restaurant open? And he said, yes, because the one in London wasn't. So he said, well, okay, so let's go over Dallas, straight into Palm Springs. So that's what we did. So we've made all of these changes because of COVID, which is unheard of in a normal environment. And I would venture to say, Chris, we're going to see that scheduling drama and those folks that are doing it, aside from needing psychiatric help, probably. I mean, seriously, it's really hard stuff.
Yeah.
And then sprinkle it with economics. Yeah. Like, okay, what's the load factor? What's the demand? And forget next winter with the weather. I mean, all of these complications go into the scheduling function, and they certainly don't publicly get the kind of credit that they deserve because it is enormously difficult moving between, the maintenance piece and the flight ops piece and the demand piece. And it's extremely complicated behind that curtain.
It is, isn't it? And there's so many things that go into it. And now it's a little bit like sports and a sports team. Some games it's the forwards who are the most valuable. Other games it's the midfield, then it's the defenders, and then it's the goalkeeper. The whole business is changing now. Who's the MVP on the field of play? It's incredible.
And when you mentioned that, you gave me a thought. You got the offense and the defense, right? Yeah. And they make audibles.
Yeah.
The quarterback will make an audible because he sees the defense and how they're lined up, right?
Yeah.
Well, American Airlines is a scheduler, and I'm looking out. What's the other guy doing?
Yeah.
If I'm leaving at 9 a.m, is United leaving at 9? When are they going to San Francisco? When are they going to London? So, in fact, the quarterback / scheduler is also looking out across the line at the defense, right? Which is the competitor,
Yep.
and say, well, okay, what are they doing on price and scheduling?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I wonder how many Tom Brady's are in the scheduling world of the airlines.
Well, I give them all a lot of credit. I've obviously been part of it for many years, and it's very difficult. And when we talk about the Ops Center at American, when we get around to that, I'll explain
Yeah.
exactly how sophisticated it is.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. Now, something you touched earlier on the wingtips, and you mentioned in the book about Richard Whitcomb, who was the guy who took an already known concept and then he defined it and refined it, and it's now the wingtip, and he termed the phrase. Now, that to me was something I remember seeing it and thinking to myself, damn it, why didn't I think of that? Because at school, we had all the guys, you used to make the little paper planes.
Yeah.
And we used to have a competition where we would see who could fly one the longest, but also the most accurate. And we used to do it lining up all the bins. And then this one kid, he did this bit where he made a different shaped one and he turned the ends up, and the damn thing, it not only did it get the furthest, it was also the most accurate. And I can remember thinking, why don't airplanes do that? And then all of a sudden you then see it, and like you said, it was Richard Whitcomb, and we also did a podcast. We did a podcast with a guy called Nicholas Gauda. I always have trouble pronouncing his name, from Tamarack Aerospace Group, and he challenges everybody now that his company's design of the winglets can make such a difference to any aircraft.
Well, it improves lift, fuel burn, sort of obvious things, but let me give you an example. We carried suitcases for years, and then somebody put wheels on them.
Yeah.
Wheels. I mean, think about how simple, when you talk about the simplicity of a winglet.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Wheels on your piece of luggage.
Yeah. No more backache. Yeah, incredible, isn't it? Yeah, but it did cause a problem then with the overheads because of those wheels and the extra little bit of width.
And that when the flight attendants started doing it, there was a little bit of macho with the male pilots. They didn't feel like it was macho for a while. It's true. And then all of a sudden I said, well, forget the macho thing. This is really easy. So obviously everybody has it now. And of course, remember the old crew kits, those big bags you had to carry around?
Yeah.
You get out on a laptop now or an iPad.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. And now at least when you're moving your bag, you can do it nice and easily, and you've got a lot more balance and capability with the phones, which are taking over the world.
Yeah.
Now, moving on, we got the supersonic, and what a terrible end to something that made such a difference to so many and was a phenomenon, and it was just unique, the Concorde. I mean, what a sad end.
And it's really disappointing. There was only 20 made, and they were for British and Air France, nobody else. And they had this issue of breaking the sound barrier over land and the noise that it emitted. But the economics were tough too, between the fuel burn, maintenance on the engines, and you need economies of scale when you produce airplanes. If you produce 1 versus 10 versus 20 versus 50 versus 100, right? A lot of the same effort goes in, but you can spread that overhead and development costs over 100 versus 10. So that's fairly obvious. But in addition, when that airplane rotated on Air France out of Orly, it caught a piece of metal, which we thought at the time was a tire from that airplane, but apparently it was a part from a Continental airplane that then busted the tire of the Concorde, and on rotation, it spilled fuel, caught the left engine. Everybody's seen the video on takeoff, and it went into a hotel, and it was it was headed towards the bin in any case because of the economics and the limited demand. I mean, I've taken it a couple of times because it was really fast. It wasn't that comfortable. The seats were narrow, and you were just buying speed. You certainly weren't buying comfort, but it couldn't stand the test of both economics, and of course that crash pretty much put an end to it.
Oh, was it 113 people?
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible. Huh?
Yeah.
And like you said, FOD, and with technology now, I mean, everybody does the FOD checks around the aircraft and on the stands and out the back of the sheds and everything. But I don't know, is there something out there now that is able to scan a runway ahead of an aircraft?
It probably not on the airplane itself, but they're very diligent airport authorities on birds and bird strike. That's a harder one actually, and constantly cleaning the runways. But if somebody in front of you drops something, then I guess there's always that exposure. But it's pretty rare to happen.
Yeah, terrible thing. Huh? A combination of, I suppose, just so many circumstances and unfortunate issues. But yeah, no, terrible. Now, another area that you cover, David, which is important for every airline, and especially if they need to do things, from a tactical perspective, is aircraft leasing and the right aircraft at the right time and to meet the demand, etc. Now, you mentioned a guy called Steve Hazy, who you dealt with through 5 airlines, I think you say in there, and 3 of them were as you were taking them out of Chapter 11. Now, obviously, you had a good relationship. Now, he obviously must have been very good at what he was doing.
Steve came over to the U.S. from Hungary with the Ganda brothers, which were also partners of his, although Steve was sort of the point guy, very smart guy.
Yeah.
And he had no money. He ended up in L.A., and I first met him at a dinner sponsored by the Wings Club of the West Coast, and I was at the Boeing table with the VP of sales, and I was with AirCal at the time, and I was very honored just to be at that table. It was a black tie, and Steve was at that table with his wife and fabulous lady, and that's when I first met him. And he and Boeing were describing to me the lease phenomenon. Back in the day, you bought airplanes and you financed them like your house with a bank. And then all of a sudden, a Hazy, there was a couple of them, but Steve really was the champion, really to this day. He started ILFC, International Lease Finance Corporation, became the biggest in the world, 1,000 airplanes, has his own G5, flies it himself to this day. And so Steve came up with this idea of buying the airplanes, and he networked him with insurance companies because insurance companies build up a lot of cash.
Yeah.
But if they have an asset that appreciates in value, they can take that off the earnings on their P&L and depreciate it over X, 5, 10, 15, probably 20 years would be my estimate, depends. And so they improve their cash flow and reduce their tax exposure, and the value of the asset can theoretically appreciate as long as you take care of it. And what they put into the leases, and Steve was one of the first guys, he was brilliant at return conditions. He was tough. It wasn't just the rate you paid for, but you had, the monthly rate, and then you had cycles, and which is a takeoff and a landing. And if you take off more and land more, it's more expensive than if you go long distance. And then the return conditions, which says you got to return it in X when they go lease it again. So he came up with that model, very, very successful. The guy's made billions of dollars and homes everywhere. And to this day, I've always enjoyed his company. And so at that table, he explained, we're going to be buying airplanes from Boeing. And Boeing said, the VP of sales at the table said to me, we're only going to sell about 10% to leasing companies and the rest direct to the airlines. This was back in the 70s. Yeah. And then it became 20% and then 30%. And then Steve comes up with a lot of money. And of course, they took it public. And so they raised a lot of funds. And so he would buy slots. And he was very good at buying airplanes when other people didn't want them. The cycles in the industry up and down and up and down. And he did with the 757. People weren't ready to buy the 75s. He goes in and buys maybe 100 of them, spreads it out over time. And then when everybody needs them, he's got the slots. And when we got the first 737-300 at AirCal in Newport Beach, we needed it for noise abatement because the decibel 5 points out there, John Wayne, and you got to be below a certain noise level in order to qualify for slots.
Yeah.
So we had to get that first 300. Well, guess who had them? Was Southwest had slots.
Yeah.
So we talked to Steve Hazy. It's in the book. I got a photo of us accepting the airplane. And we went to Southwest and got their slot
Yeah.
so that we could get the first one.
Yeah.
And then the book describes taking that airplane and flying it around the West Coast. General Lyon flew it, our chairman. And there is nothing, no experience quite like walking out into a clean hangar at Boeing. Nothing in the hangar except your airplane with the beautiful paint job. There's about 10 or 20 of us, key officers, and the two owners and our wives. And taking that airplane, when we opened up the doors, it was snowing in Seattle. We didn't want to get it wet. We didn't want to get it dirty. It's like a new car. And then we flew around the West Coast and with Steve. When we accepted the airplane, we were up in the chairman's office. T. Wilson was the guy's name at the time from Boeing. And we had champagne. And he gave me keys, a key to the airplane, which it's not really a key, but it is a key when you look at it. I still have it right here in the office. And that was my first experience with Steve Hazy getting an airplane. And then I got airplanes from at AirCal, at Sun Country, Pan Am. In fact, he had airplanes with us when I went over to Golden Myanmar a couple of years ago in Burma.
Yeah.
And Pan Am. And he and I went through some really, really tough times. I sealed a deal with him once to save Sun Country, absolutely save Sun Country, because we had to reduce our fleet and the FAA wouldn't keep our certificate alive unless we were flying. And you had like a 30-day window. I literally called Steve on the phone from Minneapolis, and we had a deal over the phone where I said, listen, I can't pay for those airplanes right now. So let's start low, like 25,000, and then ratchet it up over a couple of years. And that way I can continue to fly and handle the cash flows.
Yeah.
Over the phone.
Yeah. But it's a very clever and flexible way of supporting the business.
Well, and of course, leasing now is the one. With the current pandemic, some folks that have their own airplanes will do what's called a sale leaseback.
Yeah.
So they'll go to the Hazis of this world. There's a lot of competitors out there now. Yeah. Steve's IOCC's gone. He's with a new leasing company. So they'll take the airplane and lease it back to you, so you get the cash.
Yeah.
When Northwest was taken over by these two fellows that really, really made a lot of money, Northwest had a fabulous balance sheet. They owned property in Japan. They owned all their airplanes. These guys came in for like 25 million, took control of Northwest Airlines, and started selling off those assets, including the airplanes. And they did sale leasebacks. Yeah. They became multi-millionaires doing it.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing option. And the way it's done now is incredible. And obviously with cargo, and now you've got freight forwarders, they're getting involved in it now, and they're, leasing their own aircraft for their own services. So they've got direct influence over what goes. And it's a very, very changing world now.
The other piece of that discussion, which people don't focus on, is the power plant, the engines.
Yeah.
Because, okay, lease the airplane, but roughly you need a spare engine for every 6 engines because they go through overhauls and that sort of thing. So you lease engines separately from the airplane.
Yeah.
We had a company once when I was involved with General Lyon where we would buy new engines, and instead of leasing them at the time, we would break them down and sell the spare parts of the Pratt & Whitney engine as if they were new parts, because they were new at 95% of list. It was a great business for a while until some guys at Pratt & Whitney said, something's wrong with this model. Shouldn't we be just doing it a different way? But there's companies out there now that just lease engines, not airplanes.
Yeah. No, it's incredible how things have developed on. And then another issue, which most, like you said earlier about there's so much goes on behind the curtains that people don't understand. And I think this pandemic now has made people focus more on the aviation industry and to want to know more. And I think we've never been as good as we could have been at the PR and the promotion and letting people know why certain things happen the way they do. And I think one element in this particular chapter that you really hit the nail on the head is where you talk about, meltdown schedules, whether it's to do with weather or whatever disruption. And you have to have some sort of contingency plan, and you have to reduce the number of flights so that you've got the the scope to cater for delays and cancellations, etc. So there's a lot goes behind that to keep the services in operation, but the passenger, irrespective of their position, education, experience, whatever it is, they can't see what has had to happen to allow certain numbers of flights to actually depart in whatever the conditions are, and they don't appreciate it. And the conflict and the just the bad feeling and misunderstanding that goes on from there, because they don't understand what goes on behind the scenes, has a fallout.
I took a course early on with TWA, a management training program, where it was the inbox exercise. A lot of people have probably been through it, where you sit down and you have an inbox and you go through your inbox, and you got to fire somebody, or somebody's disciplined, or you're going to buy a company. So you're working the inbox. So imagine you're this person sitting in the center of the operations hub at American Airlines at Dallas Fort Worth. You're sitting right there in the middle, and you're new and you don't know anything. And you say, okay, now what are you going to do at 3 o'clock? Because here's what the current conditions are. We got weather in Chicago.
Yep.
We've got an airplane broken in Tulsa. We've got an airplane that's due for a check that's missed its check in San Francisco. We've got pilot sick over here in Oklahoma City. I mean, and then the ops center at American, which I go into detail in the book, and Doug Parker was very nice to me in opening it up for a day. I'm used to that environment. I mean, I lived through that environment, but to see it, it's like NASA today. Yep. All these overhead TVs, but they have sections, modules for every discipline. So you got a guy in the center, or gal in the center, raised up, and he is that orchestra leader that has the baton.
Yep.
And he's kind of the grand wazir of what happens, right? And what amazed me was they also have a section for social media. They got like 6,000 to 10,000 tweets, et cetera, a day. Just that's one section.
Yeah.
So if you go and say, what's happening to my airplane or my flight, it goes into that room. Yep. So you've got the maintenance guys over here have their own desk.
Yep.
You've got the flight ops people. You have the crew scheduling people. You have the customer service people. You have the airport people. They're all modules, and they're all staffed by 3, 4, 5, 6 people in front of computers handling your delay.
Yep.
So when you're sitting there at the airport in Miami, and you're looking at that gate agent, and you want to yell at the gate agent, who's like the one guy that hasn't done anything wrong except take care of you, and you're yelling at him. It's really sort of not a smart thing to do. But in any case, he's getting feedback, and it can't always be accurate. This old advice time, typically we'll give you an hour advice time, because the maintenance has to go up, check the airplane.
Yeah.
If it's a hub, if it's a spoke, they might not have the same level of maintenance access. But in any case, so they're working out all of these variables. They look at the load factor, they look at the connections. They know how many people in that airplane are connected to X, Y, and Z. They know what the weather conditions are, which can change. All that is being handled right in that ops center. And I just wish, can't happen, but I just wish that people would have a better understanding of the dynamics and the orchestration that it takes, and the dedication that is involved. It's like an orchestra leader when you think about it, with like 50 instruments in front of him. He's got to fine tune each one of those instruments, right, to make the music that is designed to be made off the sheet of paper, sheet of music, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what this person does in coordinating all of those different elements. And I think if you just sat down with the common passenger and said, what are all the different elements that are involved in you sitting in this seat and that airplane taking off?
Yeah.
They wouldn't even
not at all. And I mean, you've actually listed so many, but I think that the transformation from the old OCC, which in itself was fantastic, to the IOCC, and I remember from the cargo days, to have cargo having a seat at the table, instead of just being called from dispatch, was a huge difference. But it made such a huge difference with, looking after the containers, the ULDs, offloads, pre-advice, all those issues which were so important. The IOCC now is something special. I genuinely, David, I think every airline within their IFE, so the in-flight entertainment, they should have a documentary or some sort of insight, a window into it, where they encourage, and the captains, they're always in their announcement, they say, guys, it's such a pleasure to have you on board and we value your custom, etc. But we'd love you to see what goes on behind the service that we're able to offer you. And if you get the chance, please look at such and such, to get as many people to see it as possible. Because I've just made a list. You talk about it. You said the various IOC teams at American Airlines included, and obviously not, this isn't the full, the ultimate list, but you've put crew scheduling, social media, dispatch, systems, customer service, flight planning, emergency planning, weight and balance planning, workload planning, maintenance control, flight service daily ops, air traffic management, ops systems and decision support, ops engineering, look ahead, the technology department focus on development, and also cargo ops. I've got to pull you on that one. It's the last one on the list. So I think now cargo is going to start sliding up everybody.
Oh, it is. Yeah. And you have weather too. You have a whole section that's just on weather.
Exactly. But that entire list is a phenomenal orchestra that plays music to the film that everybody loves to see from their seat.
That's right. And every day there is an ops coordinated meeting, usually 8 o'clock in the morning or wherever. I've had it every airline. And you sit there and you run the airline. You talk about what happened yesterday.
Yep.
And then, okay, what's teed up for today? And you talk about, you have maintenance in Tulsa, this is American as an example.
Yeah.
And you have all the key stations on there listening. And of course, everything's been sent out in advance.
Yep.
So you have yesterday's report card, the delays, cancellations, all the reasons, on a couple of pieces of paper.
Yep.
And then you have what's queued up for today and what are the main issues for today's decision making. It's you're right. It really should be a documentary in and of itself. People would be aghast. And it supports what I've said for so many years, the value and the contributions of individuals in this industry in something that's so highly technical and never gets the appreciation that it deserves.
Yeah, no, I think on that note, with appreciation, recognition, respect, and just caring more, I think if people start to do that, and then as everybody comes back now, people shouldn't be allowed to forget how much we missed so many things that we took for granted prior to this, and how many things are necessary to make people feel fuller. And anybody that's doing you a service now, they should enjoy it and embrace it and love to be giving that service, not be frustrated and miserable. If you're miserable and frustrated, don't be in that business, go somewhere else. But equally, the people who are receiving the service should acknowledge, respect, and appreciate what somebody else is doing for them. And I think if we have that caring culture moving forward and a lot more awareness of what goes on behind the screens, there'll be so much more appreciation and people will start to feel better about themselves. And maybe some of this mental anxieties and all this pressures and depression and stuff, maybe that will start to go away if people just start to recognize each other.
The population has been decimated, the employee population, 100,000 just in the US. And I tell the story about a pilot who's a captain, we all spend what we make, right, as a general rule. And all of a sudden he's 55 years old. He's flying a wide-bodied airplane, making good money, kids in college, that sort of thing. Yeah. And all of a sudden his career's over. Yeah. I mean, I was talking to a captain that was with Virgin Atlantic that fortunately she, as a captain, has got a cargo job for 747s, which probably saved her career, but she was one of the fortunate ones. So look, if you're an accountant, you're going to find accounting jobs somewhere, right? Yeah. If you're in retail, it's a tougher business. But if you're a crew member, and particularly if you're a cockpit crew member or a very well-trained mechanic takes some of that skill over to auto and some other places, but 50, 55, 60-year-old captain, his world is a lot different. And even if he gets back flying again, It won't be the same. He'll probably be on a smaller airplane, so his compensation will be less. His
Yep.
lifestyle will be impacted. His domiciles will be different. All that's still to happen. It's really tough to be in this business right now, and
It is.
I just reach out to anybody and everybody that flies to acknowledge and appreciate what the industry and its employees have gone through. It's been extremely difficult.
Yeah, no, it is. And anything that can be done now, you know, to bring back better. And like I do some other podcasts, Dave, as you know, and, you know, governments have been saying build back better. And I disagree with that, because I've done construction as well. And if you build back better, it means that you've had to demolish or you've had to start. But if you bring back better, it means that you've learned something. And the one thing for sure now is people are so pent up, you know, there's a lot of things that people want to do. So the bounce back is going to be better than anybody can expect. And please God, it comes sooner and quicker, whether it's with vaccine passports or whatever it is, to get us all, you know, moving again and enjoying what we do with the people we love, you know, the better.
One of the things that has been as accompanied this COVID is technology, because it's been moving ahead. You know, you can check in from home and you get your boarding pass, but there's going to be less and less human interaction.
Yep.
Because you can read your eye or your fingerprints and that sort of thing. So on the positive side, in terms of efficiencies in processing passengers, it's going to be better. I mean, it already is.
10 years in one.
And face masks are going to be around for a long time. But I think people have appreciated now, if they listen and understand the filtration process and what goes into that one aspect of an airplane, where the air is so much purer than you're going to find anywhere else. I think people are beginning to understand that, my God, I didn't even know these filters were here.
Yes. Yes.
I fly and I get a cold. Well, you're more likely to get a cold somewhere else than flying. I mean, it's not to say you can't.
Yeah.
But it's clearly less likely, and statistics right up until today continue to support the quality of air and the safety while you're on the airplane. Your problem is where you came from and where you're going.
Exactly.
While you're on the airplane.
Exactly. Yeah, the HEPA filters, and they compare it to being in an operating theatre.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misperception and illusion, and there's a lot more clarity now. And I just think now the more information that people get, the more they'll respect what they've got. And we've come to the end. And David, as always, absolutely superb talking to you and touching base again. And in 2 weeks' time, we start chapter 6, which is pricing and scheduling. So we're getting through the book now. And again, to anybody who's listening, or if we're not covering every single word and every single detail, but if you want a good book and a nice book and an easy book to read, get yourself a copy of Turbulence before we finish the series.
Well, thanks for your support, Chris. I appreciate it very much.
No, likewise. It's honestly, I look forward every couple of weeks, and I'd probably be disappointed as we come to the end. So you're going to have to write another book, Dave.
Some people have said that. Mike O'Leary, I sent him a copy of my book a couple of weeks ago, the Ryanair CEO.
Yeah.
And he said the same thing.
Yeah.
He sent me a very nice letter, and he said, by the way, with this turbulence thing and COVID, he said, you really need to start a second book.
Yeah. Turbulence 2.
Yeah, I might. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. TOO, not TWO.
Yeah. Well, take care, my friend.
Yeah. God bless you, and have a safe trip. And we'll be doing the next one with you over in the US.
Palm Springs.
Yep. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Take care, sir.